Welcome Trinidad and Tobago to our News 4 report, a product of the Government Information Services Limited and the Ministry of Communications. I'm Joseph Lopez. Let's take a look at the headlines. The UN Security Council hosts a workshop in Trinidad. This country a leader in the sustainable development of Caribbean tourism. And young people shine at the National Consultation on Constitutional Reform. In our top story, the government of Trinidad and Tobago is working with the United Nations towards the successful implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 1540. This resolution will strengthen the Caribbean region's ability to interdict illegal drugs, stem the proliferation of small arms and light weapons, and reduce transnational crime.
The United Nations Security Council Committee, established pursuant to Resolution 1540, is currently in Trinidad and Tobago to engage in a three-day workshop geared toward the implementation of the resolution. On April 20, 2004, the United Nations Security Council unanimously adopted the Resolution 1540 under Chapter 7 of the United Nations Charter, which affirms that the proliferation of nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons and their means of delivery constitutes a threat to international peace and security. The resolution obliges states inter alia to refrain from supporting by any means non-state actors from developing, acquiring, manufacturing, processing, transporting, transferring, or using nuclear, chemical, or biological weapons and their delivery systems. At the opening of the conference on Wednesday, Regional Implementation Coordinator of the Council, O'Neill Hamilton, praised Trinidad and Tobago for its role in the initiative.
From the inception of this regional program, which seeks to assist CARICOM member states with effectively assuming their obligations under Resolution 1540, the Government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago has stood foursquare in support of this initiative, both in terms of its national engagement as well as its support for regional initiatives focusing on implementing strategic trade laws and regulations, as well as building necessary capacity within the Caribbean to prevent proliferation.
He says ongoing cooperation with the government of Trinidad and Tobago remains a cornerstone of the ongoing regional effort to combat proliferation both within the region and the wider hemisphere. The visit to Trinidad and Tobago of His Excellency Mr. Kim Suk, chairman of the Resolution 1540 Committee, is the first for Latin America and the Caribbean. During his address, he spoke of the important roles for the UN member states under the Resolution 1540, in particular the adoption and enforcement of appropriate and effective laws.
Such measures encompass accountability, physical protection, border control, export and transshipment controls, as well as critical financial aspects. While these obligations appear brief as written, it must be recognized that they cover a wide array of issues. Furthermore, their full and effective implementation will require actions of a different kind and at different level, with the participation of all relevant national stakeholders, including the industry and the private sector.
Acting Prime Minister, the Honorable Winston Dukaran, welcomed the high-level committee and expressed his pleasure with the country's hosting of the workshop where professionals and technicians would participate.
Our economy is at risk at times because of our petrochemical nature. Our economy is at risk at times because we are a transshipment port in the Caribbean and Latin America. And therefore, the issues of biological and chemical warfare, and indeed the prospects of some global conflagration with respect to arms, nuclear warfare, is something that we have to be always concerned about. And therefore, what we'll be doing over the next 3 days is to try and identify our capability to handle these issues and to mitigate against the risk that are associated with such events taking place.
The mission to Trinidad and Tobago follows a recommendation from the Regional Implementation Coordinator to be the first recipient of international assistance under the CARICOM United Nations Security Council Resolution 1540 Implementation Program. Nikolai Edwards, News 4.
Trinidad and Tobago continues to be a significant regional leader in the sustainable development of Caribbean tourism. For yet another time, this country has hosted the Caribbean Tourism Organization's annual conference.
The region's leading tourism officials and key stakeholders, as well as international experts, have all converged in Trinidad and Tobago for the Caribbean Tourism Organization's 14th Annual Caribbean Conference on Sustainable Tourism Development. The conference, which opened on Monday, will run until April 18th and will facilitate the sharing of experiences, discussions on key issues affecting tourism, and generation of new ideas. It is expected that the knowledge to be gained can be used to design and implement the best possible policies and programs lending to a sustainable and competitive future for the regional tourism industry. At the opening ceremony, U.S. Virgin Islands Commissioner of Tourism, Beverly Nicholson Doty, who also sits as CTO Chair of the Council of Ministers and Commissioners of Tourism, praised Trinidad and Tobago for hosting the conference for a third stint.
On behalf of the 32 member countries of the Caribbean Tourism Organization, I thank Trinidad and Tobago for hosting this conference, one of the most important regional tourism conferences on our calendar. Trinidad and Tobago has to be congratulated for its vision and for its dedication, as it is the only CTO member country to host the Sustainable Tourism Conference on 3 occasions. Thank you. This demonstrates a commitment to the preservation of the region's natural resources and speaks volumes for a country whose economy is driven by the energy sector. It is also a very smart decision because figures are now showing that sustainable tourism not only preserves resources for enjoyment of future generations, but it also produces profits in the present.
The theme of this year's conference is Keeping the Right Balance, Enhancing Destination Sustainability Through Products, Partnership and Profitability. It features focused panel discussions, special presentations and interactive workshops.
Sustainable tourism is a good tourism policy. It is good for the people of our nations, it is good for the visitor experience, and it is good for business and the local communities. Indeed, it is now a fact that we can earn green by being green. The Caribbean has long been a leader in tourism, but we cannot rest on our laurels. We have to keep refreshing our products. We are one of the world's most desired destinations, but the time has come for us to put our heads together and up our sustainable tourism development game to ensure we remain in the lead.
The Honorable Acting Prime Minister Winston Ducaran spoke of the strength of the Caribbean region in terms of its numbers and its ability to sustain the tourism sector. He also highlighted the challenges that face the region, but in the same breath expressed his confidence in the Caribbean's resilience.
The entire Caribbean region in its old history have always had to face up to the question of responding to external shocks. It is not something new for us in the Caribbean region. It is not something that comes now and will be removed tomorrow. Dealing with shocks is part of our economic history. And if there's one thing we can say about the Caribbean region, about the countries in the Caribbean Sea, is that we have been able to be resilient to these shocks over time. Had that not been so, then we in the Caribbean would have sunk a long time ago. And therefore, the confidence that I have that the recent shocks that we have encountered are matters that we shall also overcome as a hurdle in our path.
He says it is important for the Caribbean to develop a capacity to adjust to changing situations, to ensure that it can cope with new storms ahead, and to be comforted by buffers that must be put into place. The Honorable Acting Prime Minister used the opportunity to comment on the imposition of duty tax by Britain on persons travelling to the Caribbean.
We have always opposed the imposition of additional passenger tax that has been placed on the Caribbean by the British authorities. We have made numerous efforts to have a review of them. Travel between the United Kingdom and the United States is much cheaper than travel between the United Kingdom and the Caribbean. And to some extent, that has been due to the fact that the recently imposed taxation by the United Kingdom authorities is inimical to the interests of a level playing field in the developing world. We make a call again that must be reviewed so that we can create a sense of competitiveness in our approach to developing a sustainable approach for development.
Nikolai Edwards, News 4.
After the break, we tell you how young people join to help shape our Constitution. Stay with us. Welcome back. Young people took the spotlight at the 10th public meeting of National Consultation on Constitutional Reform. The consultation, chaired by Legal Affairs Minister Prakash Ramadar, was held at the Penal Secondary School.
Several young persons made their contribution at the consultation on constitutional reform. There was also a plea for jobs for young people who have graduated, especially with university degrees, to get jobs within a certain time frame. Minister Ramadar commended the presence of the youth, who he says was the future of the nation.
If I may take the opportunity now to thank you for having come, because your presence really is very, very significant. Because for the first time, we are here to hear from the population as to the sort of constitution we wish to see, not just for today, but for future generations. And therefore, your contributions, your comments, are very, very important, because whatever we say and do now may very well form part of the new constitution that will govern the lives of our people for many generations yet to come.
Several other issues were raised, such as local government representation, presidential elections, executive presidency, fixed election dates, and a referendum. Ramadar said those issues were the main ones for all the consultations thus far.
I want to make it quite clear that feel that you're amongst friends, that whatever you say will be respected. You can say whatever you wish in a respectful manner equally, and that there's no criticism or any condemnation of any point of view. In fact, for the last several of these events that we've had, some very innovative thoughts, things that we had never thought about even.
One person suggested that the appeal court be the main court for dealing with criminal cases. Another said the country's resources should be localized and used for the development of the communities they are found in. Another said a fixed budget should be given to members of parliament and city and regional corporations for the development of their electoral districts. Minister Ramadar, speaking with reporters following the consultation, said one of the main issues arising out of the meetings was referendum, and whether citizens should be allowed to vote not just during local and general elections. He adds it was his opinion that citizens be allowed to vote on larger issues, such as the implementation of the death penalty. Nikolai Edwards, News 4.
Minister of the People and Social Development, Dr. Glenn Ramadar Singh, says local government offices should be strengthened through the establishment of a link with the Ministry of People and Social Development. He was speaking with councillors at the Strengthening Representation Program at the Penal Debe Corporation Office.
Councillors will soon be able to function with more efficiency. This from Minister of the People and Social Development, who says by establishing and strengthening ties between the ministry and local government, citizens would be better served, as councillors will now have direct access to services such as issues and resolution, food cards, NSDP cards, URP social, poverty reduction program, and disaster preparedness. The minister says local government has been able to function at a greater capacity, with government revising the responsibilities of councillors. The minister reiterated some of the services being provided under his ministry, which will now be made even more accessible to citizens.
The URP Social actually has the direct construct where you can get homes built, and we've built homes in Penal and in Point Fortin and in different parts of this country. But through the URP Social, you can get an entire house built for some $80,000 or $90,000. If the persons have no food in the home, that's the criteria. If they have difficulty putting food on the table, we can intervene in that regard. Then you have the poverty reduction unit, where the person can access, but before I go there, social welfare, where you can get the public assistance. You know, a lot of you know about that. You can get the pension for those of you who are 65 and over, the pension. So you can get the pharmaceutical grant. If you have someone getting difficulty buying medication, you can get $2,500 for 3 months. Many of you don't know that. Also, psychosocial support, counseling is important. That can be provided by the TT card unit.
The minister is also announcing plans to increase the small business grants currently available to qualified citizens by $10,000.
You have Dinesh Sankar Singh, who is the chairman of this part of the country, right? Dinesh, you all know Dinesh. You can work with Dinesh to get grants of $5,000 to get young people to buy a camera or to buy a video camera where they can start their own business, where they can help someone to get into a hairstyling salon, things like this, so that they can get into their own business with $5,000. We are going to cabinet to increase that figure to $15,000 because we feel that you need $15,000 to start a substantial business.
Dr. Ramadas Singh is reflecting on the tremendous success of government in recent times. He's also revealing that a new building has been identified in Penal to house a people's unit for the ministry. This, he says, is a great step towards development in Penal.
I have good news, and we are living in interesting times. We just saw a building today that the Ministry of the People will occupy, and the People's Unit will be housed right here in Penal next to FCB. So all these services and officers will come to you. So it's good for you to have the background now as you go back and you prepare to go back to the polls and you go out into your walkabouts. You are now armed with more information. For your elderly, you can begin to organize them. If the mosque or the temple has a room, an extra room, we can put gym equipment, we can put computers. We are working on this.
Verna Barath, News 4.
Up next, the very latest in sports. Stay with us. Welcome back. For 30 years, former national netballer Peggy Castaneda has been passing on her knowledge in her capacity as a coach at the Ministry of Sport. At the 8th Annual Women and Girls in Sport Festival on Saturday at the Eastern Regional Sport Complex, the 1979 world champion was honored as she's set to resign from a position at the ministry. However, we are sure it will not be the final time we see Peggy Castaneda on the courts. And here's Wayne Cunningham with more from Tacarigua.
Peggy Castaneda was a member of the World Championship winning netball team of 1979. Lindell Hoyt Sanchez, Senior Sport Officer at the University of Trinidad and Tobago, put into perspective the contribution of Peggy and her teammates to sport in Trinidad and Tobago.
The Ministry of Sport has had the opportunity to interface with some of the women who have made significant contributions to the development of women and girls in sport in Trinidad and Tobago. Some of these individuals will include persons like the late Mrs. Jean Pierre, who was a past Minister of Sport, Ms. Althea Lucius, Eunice Pena, Angela Brown, Marcia Dimsoy, Jennifer Frank, and Ms. Peggy Castaneda, in whose honor this year's festival is being held. Now, all these women were part of the 1979 World Champion Netball team. Their skill, expertise, and vast amount of experience was shared and assisted in the holistic development of a number of women and girls across the country.
Coach Castaneda gave her thoughts on the game in Trinidad and Tobago at present.
Well, not too pleased and not too happy about the situation that the sport is in right now. But hopefully that some of the programs that the ministry has over the years, that some of the players who come out of that program will do better, and we hope that will carry the team back to where it rightly belongs.
Although a void will be left by her absence, Castaneda said there will be nothing to worry about because of some capable colleagues and former teammates.
They have a lot of people outside there, man, and at the ministry we still have 2 other coaches presently, and I think they are in the process of hiring more. Jennifer is a very good coach. I mean, she's very laid back, but Jenny, I think Jenny Arong should carry the ministry a little further after.
We asked Peggy if she had any advice for young players.
Well, you should also make sport part of your life, and your main objective, just go for it. Whatever, believe in yourself. That's the first thing you have to do. Love what you do, and the sky is the limit once you do what you have to do. Commitment, dedication most of all. Commitment and dedication. Support from your family.
Wayne Cunningham, News 4 Sports.
When we return, much more on News 4. Stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. A 75-minute feature inspired by the life of legendary icon Justice Ulrich Cross will soon come to life. The film tells the timeless story of a local hero with the strength of character to find personal freedom within the stifling colonialism of the early and mid-20th century.
The well-researched story interprets the traditional perspective of the world's social and historical realities to place Caribbean families at the center of the world's major events.
This film was a dream. It was a dream of Desmond Allums. And the day before Desmond died, and we didn't know he was going to die the next day, he phoned me in Canada and told me he wanted me to make this film. I had no idea. I had never done anything like this before, but I said yes, I would do it. So this is my commitment to Desmond.
The Heathrow Untold story will educate and inspire young and old audiences across the Caribbean and internationally.
The company is Hero Film Limited, and the people who so far have contributed and partnered with us on this project, I'm going to call their names out: AmChan, BGTT, CTWD, Caribbean Tales Worldwide Distribution, GSALS Design, Calouse, K-Park, Liat, Medulla, National Gas Company, National Lotteries Control Board, Republic Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, Trinidad and Tobago Film Company, Trinidad and Tobago Government Information Services, Veni Marge, Water One, and the Ontario Arts Council in Canada.
Because of the production's international scope, Hero Film is still seeking funding. Appeals have gone out via business organizations such as the American Chamber of Commerce and by direct solicitation to some of its corporate entities. The producer of this film shares her thoughts.
Very, very proud to be the producer and director of Hero, a film inspired by the life of Ulrich Cross. I came on board a bit late, but it's my passionate commitment as well to see it realized on behalf of Anne-Marie and on behalf of Desmond and Ulrich and the Cross family and everyone who has supported it.
She says she feels inspired by this project.
The story of Ulrich's life, starting in growing up, being born into and growing up into post-colonial Trinidad, becoming one of the most decorated navigators in the Second World War, and then his post-war life of being an advisor to Kwame Nkrumah, who was the first prime minister of an independent African country.
The Ministry of Arts and Multiculturalism has certified the film so that all sponsors can claim an annual tax rebate in the amount of 150% of their actual contribution. In addition, all sponsors will be advertised with name and logo branding in the film's credit, and this will apply to any on-screen placement in the film. Nikolai Edwards, News 4.
And that story brings us to the end of our News 4 report, a product of the Government Information Services Limited and the Ministry of Communications. I'm Joseph Lopez. Thank you for watching.